Hello, and welcome to the Stock Out. This is your show at FreightWaves for all things related to the CPG industry. It's a consumer packaged goods industry. I'm your host, Mike Bowden-Distel. I'm the head of intermodal solutions here at FreightWaves, work primarily on the data side, but also get to do some media stuff, which I enjoy. And today on the CPG show, we'll be talking to Kelly Thompson, who's the SVP and head of North America for DouxMatok. DouxMatok's a global food tech company that's involved in sugar reduction. So that's been a big theme in the CPG industry, is this push towards making products healthier. It seems like every day there's another news story about consumer packaged goods and trying to make them healthy. I mean, some of the things that this company has on its website really sort of drives that home, talking about the overconsumption leading to obesity and type 2 diabetes. I also think salt, reduction of salt is going to be a big, trend, going forward. Some of the stats I thought were interesting on DouxMatok's website. 1970s, an average American consumed 123 pounds of sugar a year, which seems like a lot, but now it's 152 pounds of sugar. So let's call it a 20% increase. So elsewhere, childhood obesity rates went from 5% in the 1970s to 20% today. And 42% of the U.S. population is obese. Not trying to body shame anyone, but seems to be getting a larger problem, and also a problem that not just these companies are focused on and consumers are focused on, but also the government is focused on, across continents. Some of the UK, they've already rolled out these new nutrition labels. Might have an example of that to show, where we have these stoplight-like nutrition labels that have to go on the front of packaging. We're considering having those be regulated in the U.S. as well. In the UK, they've already banned. There's an example of the stoplight-like nutrition labels that are required by the UK health minister to go on the front of packages. So you can already see, looking at that's too high in sugar. I don't want to eat that if I'm trying to cut back on sugar. In the UK, they've already banned selling certain snacks and unhealthy products at checkout counters and end of aisle displays, because those lead to impulse purchases. And just today there was a news article about Nestle. This is the world's largest food and beverage company, that less than half of their product portfolio is considered healthy, and that's something like 2,000 brands. And this company has already done a lot of work in terms of divesting brands like a lot of the confectionery and candy brands. They've already divested, and most of their growth has been in healthier products. And we've also seen the new regulations come out for school lunches, where over the years they have to step down the amount of sugar, amount of salt in schools' lunches. The first time that at a national level, sugar has been regulated in school lunch programs. So a lot is going on there. And also talk just a minute about some of the other information that's on FreightWaves.com related to CPGs. They do have a newsletter that comes out every Wednesday. You can go to FreightWaves.com/the stock out to sign up for that. And then there were also some content this morning just on CPGs. We did on FreightWaves Now a segment examining CPG supply chains. You can see that. I go to FreightWaves.com, scroll down about halfway, and you can click to the right there. That was an interview with Paula Heiss, who's a senior VP of Kenco Logistics, on the topic of CPG supply chains, discuss why the CPG margins have contracted in recent years. And then JP Hampstead put out an article the other day on, is inflation crushing e-commerce volume growth? I think the short answer to that is yes. So go and read that. Also did a stock out show last week on that parcel segment and direct-to-consumer segment with a company called General Logistics Systems, which is a regional carrier that does primarily parcel in the West Coast. And we got into talking about D2C, a lot of subscription boxes and those things. So go check those out if that's of interest to you. And with that is just a little bit of an intro. I'd like to bring on today's guest, who is Kelly Thompson. She's the SVP, head of North America for DouxMatok. This is a global food tech company involved with sugar reduction, including its Incredo sugar product, which aims to reduce sugar by 30 to 50% without compromising on taste or texture. Kelly, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Mike, how are you? Thank you for
Good,
having
thanks.
me.
Yeah, glad you could make it. It's an interesting company. Trying to wrap my head around a little bit of the technology because if it's sort of as good as it's described, I mean, it really sounds like it could be disruptive. You could have something that is just as sweet as a regular, as sugar, just with a lot less sugar. So, can you help us maybe just wrap our heads around the technology a little bit?
Sure. We really start with cane sugar. So, I mean, we are using real sugar and we changed the process. So, we're integrating a carrier that actually changed the crystalline structure to something that's more amorphous. So, if you look at sugar today, just pure sugar, you end up getting a pretty hard crystal structure. This process changes that, makes it more amorphous, more random, so it's easier to actually hit your taste buds and you taste the sweetness faster than you do with regular sugar. So there's a lot of processing technology that is involved in it, but the great thing is it tastes like sugar because it is sugar. It's clean label because it's really just sugar plus a carrier that's typically a protein. And it's a great solution to reduce by 30 to 50% of the sugar that's in any product.
Yeah, I mean, all those things it seems like consumers really care about, and a
Yeah.
clean label is a big trend. And I sort of think about sugar reduction. I mean, there's sort of a few different ways to go about doing that. I mean, we're all familiar with the artificial sweeteners that are in our diet cokes and those things. And I've seen some other startups that are taking kind of a different approach, like Tagatos. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the advantages and the disadvantages of some of those various approaches?
Right. Well, I mean, the number one thing is that taste is king with any consumer, right? And so what this technology allows, I mean, some have achieved obviously sugar reduction and that's great. But this technology, Incredo sugar, basically allows you to have that same taste as sugar. And every consumer, 90+% will say they want it to taste exactly the same, or at
Mhm,
least the same kind of temporal, as we call it, profile of sugar. And that's exactly
mhm.
what Incredo delivers. So that's a great benefit, obviously, of Incredo sugar. Some of the other sweeteners obviously can reduce calorie, etc. This technology does not, so that could be a benefit if you're looking for that. But we tend to think about having great taste and then using portion control as a way to reduce overall caloric intake.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it is critical to keep the taste. I mean, it seems like, I mean, when I've looked at consumer packaged goods companies and the elasticities with their sales in response to the rising prices, which we've had plenty of the last 2 years, the things that taste a certain way, like a lot of food and beverage products, seem to be less elastic than, let's say, soap or detergent, where people are a little bit more willing to trade down. So I do think you're onto something with the taste is really important. That's something people are willing to compromise with. When I think about your product, and you list on your website a few different segments that you could potentially target. One would be the CPG industry. One would be food service. Maybe another would be bakers and chocolatiers. What do you think is the best use case, or maybe not even the best use case, but like the earliest adoption use case for this? Where do you think we'll see it first?
Well, and we are already in some commercial products. So chocolate has been, the great example of what's commercially available right now through the Blumber Chocolate Company. You've been a great partner for us. So fat fillings, baked goods, those types of items are what I see as the fast adopters. One thing you should know is Incredo, because of its amorphous structure, it doesn't work today, and I say today, in high water systems. So beverages right now is out, yogurt right now is out, but we are working on future technologies to allow us to attack those segments as well, or those categories as well.
Yeah, that brings me to another question. I mean, one of the ways that is interesting that you have on your website is sort of the way you describe your company. As you say, you're a leader in efficient delivery of flavors, including nutrition such as sugar reduction. And sort of the way you've worded that, it almost seems like, well, you might branch off into other things, other types of flavor profiles. Is there anything you can say about maybe the direction of the company?
Nothing I can probably say today, but we certainly are looking at probably all the areas that where there's higher intake than what a consumer should have. So, we're really focused on families and kids and making sure. You brought up an earlier data point on sugar, and I was just actually looking at the WHO information today for 23, and they recommend 25 grams of sugar a day. And the average American is taking on 126 grams of sugar daily. So we are not anti-sugar. Sugar tastes awesome. I love it, et cetera. We're anti overconsumption of sugar, and we want healthier kids and healthier consumers overall.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's hard to give your kids healthy foods because there's so many other pressures on your time. The labels are hard to read. It's just you're going on the shopping aisle and you don't have time to read everything when you have a kid next to you and those things. So it's more difficult. As far as the packaged foods go, I mean, is there a place that you'll see this? For Tameka, I sort of asked it already, but in terms of how do you view the SKU separation and sort of communicating this to consumers? I mean, do you envision two similar looking SKUs, and one has Incredo sugar and it has kind of a clean label, and the other one's just sort of the traditional SKU, and just sort of how do you envision it?
Yeah, we're probably seeing two different situations with customers. And I think the CPG world has been awesome in terms of really partnering with us to find active solutions. They've been really proactive, I think, in this, not just sitting back, and we really appreciate that. But either they're, I think about it in terms of new line items. So they're trying to say, okay, if I had, brand X, I'm thinking about creating a new kind of line that would be lower in sugar and would utilize Incredo, and also maybe put in some other healthier things or have portion control, right? Because that also adds to kind of the overconsumption of sugar and also overconsumption of calories in general. And then the other piece that we really see is, great brands saying, you know what? I just want to make sure I can test this and make sure it works 30 to 40 to 50%. And I'm just going to kind of take it down and make my current product overall healthier over time. So, we kind of see those two approaches with utilizing Incredo, and both is fine. We understand brands are exceptionally important to these wonderful companies out there, whether it's starting something new or starting something just kind of to take it down 10%, 20% and onward is their call, and whatever works best, we're here to partner with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are good points on the portion control. Is almost just as important as what you eat is how much of it you eat. Not a good idea to buy a 2-gallon thing of M&Ms at Costco, no matter the price, I don't think. So how is the cost different, currently, if you had a product that has traditional sugar versus one that's Incredo sugar?
Right. So, one thing you have to remember is that, so if you're using 1,000 pounds of sugar today, you're going to use like 600 pounds of sugar instead of Incredo sugar, correct? Mm-hmm. And so you do have to have a filler, what we call kind of the bulking agent. Some companies have used sugar typically as their bulking agent. Why? Because consumers love it, and also it's cheap, right? And instead, you have to think about putting something potentially that's healthier in place. So, fibers and things like that will make a more nutrition product. So that also adds to kind of any cost upcharge. But when you look at total kind of cost and use of product to a product with Incredo sugar, plus the fillers, I would say it's about 10 to 15% above a premium to kind of the full sugar. That might seem, of course, no one wants to hear something as higher, but you're talking about your health, you're talking about your family's health, you're talking about your kids' health, and what you put in your body over time really matters. So I see it as an investment into well-being and being healthy overall. Versus kind of, it's worth to me a 10 to 15% upcharge. And certainly healthier products all across the board are typically more expensive for that reason, because of the quality of the ingredients that they're putting in those, end products, right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound bad to me. I mean, healthy products are always more expensive, and that healthier segment, which is more expensive, is growing quite a lot faster than the traditional sort of middle of the road segment. So it's demonstrated that consumers are willing to pay a premium for the healthier products. They even seem to be willing to pay a premium for healthier pet food, products as well. So, I think it is
That's a
worth it.
good new
I want
category
to
to
talk a
think
little bit
about.
about, yeah, exactly, yeah. Want to ask you a little bit about your sort of manufacturing process and supply chains, and it's interesting. I mean, you would use less. I mean, some CPG companies, if they went to a solution like this, you talked about it a little bit. I mean, they would use less sugar and then some of these other products. But in terms of other considerations in the supply chain, what other types of sort of special characteristics do you face in your production and distribution process, or your CPG partners face?
Yeah, you know what, Mike? It actually is fairly straightforward, which is nice. So we typically work with our customer, and they are already bringing in bulk sugar to some degree. So our product can ride along with that sugar, right? There's just less of it that would come in, but so that works. I would say exceptionally well in terms of like special storage conditions or anything like that. We don't face that. We are just like sugar, so it's ambient temperature and very stable over its shelf life. So we're lucky that way. We are also though working on a future product that actually would somewhat disrupt the supply chain because it's more of a concentrated product, basically, that is going to work just as well and isn't going to have the supply chain any hangups or costs associated are going to be reduced greatly. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah, we've seen some of that in CPG. Just see if you can make the product more concentrated, then it
Right.
takes less transportation capacity to ship, which maybe less of a concern now. There's excess transportation capacity, but that is only temporary until enough transportation capacity comes out of the marketplace or the economy improves, and then it'll be tight again. What's interesting is so many of these food startups are Israeli companies, or at least founded in Israel. And can you explain why, and how does that lead to sort of a certain global distribution pattern? And you mentioned your site that you have partnership with Atlantic Sugars, Canada's largest sugar refinery. Sort of what does that partnership do for you?
Yeah, I mean, Atlantic's been an absolutely great partner for us, and we chose them because a huge market, obviously, is the U.S. So you're right, DouxMatok's, which now is the name, actually the Incredo company, Incredo Sugar Company, is actually, as a startup out of Israel, has just been absolutely, I mean, wonderful. I would love to know the secret sauce of why great startups, food tech startups, seem to work there. But I think it's a couple of creative minds along with deep science, and they're just rethinking how any product or package or anything works. And I think they're coming up with some really interesting novel approaches. So I've been in the food industry for 35 years. I've worked for some of the largest CPG companies. They've been absolutely wonderful to work for, and I welcome actually that there's been so many food tech startups that are coming out of any place, but seem to be very concentrated in Israel. So Israelis have been awesome to work with, and the partnership with Atlantic, as I stated, has worked really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Interesting to see how this develops and what other startups can arise. I mean, it's and what's interesting about your company too is you're preserving that taste and texture profile, which going back a couple of years, it's like the hot stock was Beyond Meat, which hasn't done so well in terms. And part of the reason is it was more expensive, but also because the taste was not at parity. And so it was hard to convince people to pay more for a product that tastes worse. If the product's healthier, but it tastes the same, I mean, that's going to be a much easier sell. Also want to ask you about any sort of government regulations or government grants or anything that might move the needle in one direction? I mentioned a few of them at the beginning of the show, but from your perspective, was there anything that I missed or that you would highlight?
I thought you did a really nice job of hitting the high spots. It's interesting, Mike, there's regulation almost in every country surrounding the US, right? So Canada just, adopted late last year, the middle of last year, Mexico, the UK, you mentioned, Europe, and everyone's seeing this as something that we need to just get after. I'm positive and hopeful and optimistic that we'll take the step forward in the US as well. Is it always nice to sit back and say, gosh, everyone's going to just, cut back almost 70% of their daily sugar consumption and think that's going to work? Yeah, I'd like to think that, or I could look at myself and say that as well. But the point is, we don't. We need some guidance. I think some triggers that help consumers really understand fully when you're selecting one product over another product. I agree with you. I think consumers are very busy, and they go to what also their family loves and what they grew up with, and I do the same. But it's time for that change. I think I look to help from, I guess, some labeling requirements in the U.S. That will help set, I think, consumers' direction in terms of, and the awareness to say, hey, you know what? Can I have the same product at the same or equal taste, or even in some cases prefer it? I'll tell you this story, which is interesting. We literally have done consumer tests where we've reduced sugar by 40% versus full, and actually we have come out preferred, like 68 to 32, or 55 to 45, because sugar also kind of how do I best say it? It doesn't allow all the flavors to come out, right? So it suppresses those flavors, and once you actually pull some of that out, your chocolate flavor, your vanilla flavor, your hazelnut flavor, etc., is actually more pronounced and tastes better to consumers. So there's really a win-win-win, for the consumers out there from a nutrition standpoint, but also just from a flavor standpoint. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting consumer test kind of to share with you.
Yeah, that's really interesting how the flavors are sort of suppressed, and then you just need, it gets to be like an arms race. You need more of that stuff that's unhealthy for you in order to make it taste the way it's supposed to taste. And there's parallels to other industries. It's almost like the CPG companies have gotten to be so good at efficiency, and that they've lowering costs and producing things with a high margin. I mean, some of the CPG margins are really high on those branded products, and they've done that, I think, at the expense of health. Maybe it's hyperbolic to say that big food is just like big tobacco, but I mean, they've gotten to be maybe too efficient, kind of like the railroads. I mean, they got to be too efficient, and then the rail service wasn't very good. It's almost like the customer service isn't as good as it should be for a lot of these CPG companies. Do you have any strategies for managing transportation capacity? I mean, one of the interesting things from some other companies I've talked to on this show is they're sort of fast growing brands, and at first they only have a certain amount of just goods that need to be shipped, and so they sort of have to purchase transportation capacity in the spot market, and they have to get to a certain level in order to participate in sort of a bidding process. But do you have any sort of special considerations? And are you using strictly truck, or you do any rail? Just interested to hear about your transportation capacity needs.
Yeah, right now, I mean, we're using trucks, and we're probably in a slightly different situation, and it's an easier situation first of all. And that's, even though we're a startup, we're really able to work with the, customers and ride along with kind of their, their sugar that they're pulling now. So that affords us, I think, a more streamlined way to get product to our customers. We will, if needed, obviously get material to, another, let's just say it's another startup that's, fast moving with us, but we'd probably do it in, a different way. And we utilize distributors as well through the US to actually get product to our customer set. So we're in a slightly different situation, probably certainly better, because we can ride along with sugar that our customers are already pulling in. So.
Oh yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. You sort of piggyback off of the other sugars.
Right.
Well, that's great. So this is all the time we have. But I just want to thank you for spending a little bit of time with me. How can folks reach out to you and find out more about DouxMatok?
Absolutely. They can reach me, and I appreciate it, Mike, at kelly.thompson@douxmatok.com. So I would love for anybody to reach out if you're interested in reducing sugar levels without a taste trade-off. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Great to see you.